Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John's been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this here podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives. Difference makers who really make a difference. On today's Musical Innertube, we welcome back political commentator Dick Polman. Dick is Maury Povich Writer in Residence and Professor of Journalism at the University of Pennsylvania, where he's been since 2006. He's also a former national political writer and political columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And you can always follow his work at dickpolman.net. Welcome back, Dick.
Thanks, John and Don. Thank you very much.
Hey, it's great to have you here, Dick, and I think I speak on behalf of all television watchers anywhere when I say, when is this damn thing going to end and we don't have to watch commercials anymore for how so-and-so is too extreme for us?
Well, it certainly ruined my playoffs, my baseball playoff watching.
Yes.
You know, it's
Isn't
like,
that true? I couldn't get through it. I was rooting for the Phillies to win, and then suddenly some ad came on. Especially horrible are the ones that are touting violence, not because they're false, but because they're the scariest thing I've seen. They're so frightening.
I know. I'm like, go Phillies. I feel so good about Philadelphia. And then the commercial comes on and I'm told I live in a complete war zone.
Yes.
You know, it was really cognitive dissonance, I have to say. So I just kind of tuned them out.
Yes. And I think an old friend from the Donald Trump regime is behind those, right? Stephen
so.
Miller.
Yeah. That's been reported now.
Let me tell you also, I recently took a trip up to New England to visit some friends and relatives. And while I was there, all of those candidates also have ads saying so-and-so is too extreme for New Hampshire, too extreme for Maine, too extreme for Massachusetts. That seems to be the key thing now is your opponent is too extreme. And that goes for both left and right. Mm-hmm. So I guess the whole idea is to paint whoever is your opponent as going to do terrible, terrible things to the state and to the country.
Well, I guess it's, the idea is just to gin up your own base. It's funny because when I see those ads, I think, well, maybe they're talking to the so-called people in the middle, who don't like extremists. But then, the more you look at voting patterns, you see that, the middle is, the so-called middle is kind of shrinking and everybody is kind of, bunkered in their own tribal corners. And so it's really a question of driving up your own base and maybe perhaps depressing the other side's base. And may the most successful person, may the most successful side win. Mm-hmm. We heard a lot of that in the Pennsylvania Senate debate last night, particularly from Dr. Oz talking about John Fetterman.
So I'm thinking, since you bring up the debate last night, you wrote this amazing essay, which I read with great edification about it. And you said, can't we do any better than this? I will now simply sort of this is not a word for word translation, but we have one guy with a serious medical impairment and another guy who sounds like a cross between a huckster and a chihuahua. Can't we do any better?
Yeah, a chihuahua on speed. I have to. I think I said I have to admit that was that piece was written around 7 a.m, and the very last line is can't we do any better? And it was basically because I was just so disgusted. Depleted by the whole the whole episode and the whole writing of it that I really couldn't think of a better last line, so I just left it with that and got on with my day. I would have liked to have come up with something better, but it was just so. I think I had a lead where I think my opening was something like that. When I was a kid, I would cover my eyes or my ears at times when I was watching scary movies, and I felt like I was doing it again last night. I mean, it was just excruciating. And I'm sure you guys, you must have felt that way.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's terrible to have to see somebody struggle.
I'm wondering why the Fetterman people let him go on at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in this day and age, we've gotten used to debates. I mean, I don't know exactly, maybe the JFK Nixon things touched off the notion that, that debates are a norm. I don't know when they started really being in earnest in Senate races, or governor's races. But I think we've gotten to the point now where you're expected to show up at least once. And as a matter of fact, not to change the subject, because I'm sure we want to stay on the Pennsylvania debate a bit, but in Arizona, the Arizona governor's race, where the Republican candidate is, very much a Trumpist, who says that she may not accept the results of the election if she loses. She's basically said that a number of times. She's actually, she has a darn good chance to win. In part, I see it reported, because her Democratic challenger doesn't want to debate her. And won't debate her, and Katie Hobbs, I think, is the Democrat, and she says that Carrie Lake, the Republican, if I debated Carrie Lake, it would just give her, a bigger platform to lie, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is, she already has a statewide platform to Carrie Lake. She has it anyway, but without debates, there's no one there to fact check her in real time. Not debating her kind of just gives Carrie Lake a wide open forum, and also makes it sound like the Democrat is afraid to debate her. I mean, that's the kind of thing that, the Republicans are running. They're running rampant with that message down there. And so in some ways, it's kind of like, Fetterman was kind of caught between rock and a hard place, seems to me. That if he didn't debate, it was just going to look terrible, and it was going to raise more questions about his health. But then when he did, it raised more questions about his health.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrible. I mean, God, some of the quotes that I was using this morning, it was just, you feel just by using the quotes that you're being cruel. But,
yes.
He's running for office. So what are you going to do? Not use them?
Well, we know that now that he's told us 3 times that he stands for fracking, we know that he stands for fracking, but that's got to be one of the most embarrassing moments of the entire. I mean, he needed to give a better answer than that.
Yeah.
I also noticed in reading the reviews of several of these debates, the debate in Georgia, the debate in Michigan between the gubernatorial candidates, the reaction was kind of like it was exactly what we expected. I mean, nobody's moving off of there are no surprises. Nobody's moving off of their platforms. So in one sense, the debate really didn't bring any news here in Pennsylvania or any place else for that matter.
Well, that's the thing about it is that everybody wants to know, in terms of Oz and Fetterman, everybody wants to know, how is this going to affect, how's this going to impact voting on the early voting and election day? We really don't know. It could break any number of ways. It could be there might be people who think that, Dr. Oz was, cruel to him, when I think he said at one point, I don't know if I was clear enough, John, for you to understand this.
Brother,
there was some line almost exactly like that. So there could be a sympathy vote for Fetterman, or it could just be that, in this day and age, everybody is so dug in on their partisan side, that they're just going to say, well, he's, for better or worse, this guy is my guy. And this could be either side saying this, because, the control of the Senate is at stake. And
sure.
We need that R vote, or we need that D vote. And it's the same with the Herschel Walker in Georgia. You got, I heard there was a report coming out today that there was going to be another woman coming forward saying that he drove her to an abortion clinic. But it's like you Republicans down there are going to say, well, the Senate's at stake, and it's Herschel or nothing. So, it's the same thing. One other thing I want to say about, whether it could affect of Pennsylvania, whether the debate could affect the vote in Pennsylvania, before we forget, which is that a lot of people don't watch these things in the first place. We can parse them forever, but most people don't watch them. What they see, if they see anything, is they see the sound bites, the clips, the Twitter fragments. And one of the Twitter fragments that the Democrats are going to pound away at in an ad in the upcoming days is when Dr. Oz said, he was talking about abortion, and he said that abortion should be, and I'm only slightly paraphrasing this, but he said abortion should be basically a choice between a woman, her doctor, and local political leaders. And I'm thinking, local political leaders, well, that's really, okay, well, let's bring in the MAGA county chairman in Cumberland County.
Oh my gosh.
And some of the Harrisburg legislators on the Republican side who would love to have a statewide abortion ban. So this why do local political leaders have anything to do with it? And I think there's going to be a lot of advertising on that on the Democratic side. Now, what that may just be, it may just end up maybe firming up Democrats who are just rattled by Fetterman's performance, and a lot of Democrats could just tell themselves with some reasonable justification, they can say, well, if Fetterman's in office, he'll have a staff. And, his staff will research everything and, present him with, options. And he will, he'll go with the instinctive option, which is the progressive option. And, of course, maybe you can say the same thing about Herschel Walker. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting because we do have the two debates there. We have the debate in Pennsylvania with John Fetterman, who's a little impaired after a stroke. And then we have Herschel Walker. I read two reactions to the debate that Herschel Walker had down there with the sitting senator.
Warnock.
Number one, why are we voting for Iraq to go to the U.S. Senate? And the other one was the woman who said, I don't care who he is or what he is, just vote him in so we can get control of the Senate again.
Yeah, that's it.
It was
somebody prominent said that last one.
Yeah,
that you mentioned. Somebody prominent said that.
Tulsi Gabbard, or is that who it is?
Yeah, one of those. Yeah,
I don't care if he kills all the baby eagles as long as we get control of the Senate.
That was the line.
I don't care if he shoots somebody on. I don't care if he pays for an abortion in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Whatever.
Whatever it was that Trump said.
Whatever Trump said. Yeah. I mean, that's it, really.
In the middle of the summer, it seemed Democrats had a lead. Now, of course, as we're getting closer to the election, it seems like Republicans have picked up some steam in some of the races. Is there any way, after looking at ads and debates and polls and that sort of thing, to get a clear idea of where we're going on this thing?
You mean in terms of how things are going to turn out in terms of the control of either chamber? Well, it's interesting you asked that, because I was looking today at there's somebody who I follow on Twitter, but he's a really interesting numbers cruncher for the Democrats. His name is Simon Rosenberg, and he alone almost has been very optimistic about the Democrats' chances here, despite, it looked like the races are tightening, or people are still talking. Now they're talking again about a red wave. But what he argues is that, and he could be completely wrong here, but if he's not, he's going to turn out to be like a seer, that what the polls may not be able to measure, late surges in turnout among, say, ticked off women, about the end of Roe v. Wade, and young people voting under 30 who, according to the polls, if you look at just their sentiments, they are bluer than any other age demographic. And a lot of it's about cultural issues, such as gay marriage, et cetera, and abortion. So the argument that Simon Rosenberg is making is that, the polls are measuring, they're freeze framing likely voters in the moment. And likely voters are usually defined as likely voters are people who have voted a lot in previous elections. That's why they're the most likely to vote. So what he's basically saying is that that some of these turnout surges that we've seen in a lot of races in recent months, special elections in the House, referendums on abortion in places like Kansas, missed. The polls missed these people. In fact, the Kansas referendum to whether to keep abortion legal, the final polling was that it was really, really close, and that it could go illegal in the final vote. And it turned out to be a 10-point margin to keep abortion legal in Kansas. And that was missed by the pollsters. So, so it's a question of, how they're screening for their people, and they may be missing a wave that we're not seeing. Now, I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. To talk about it at all sounds like I'm, just being, pie in the sky for the Democrats on this, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think anybody who thinks anybody who says they know exactly what's going to happen in a couple of weeks, I wouldn't believe them.
Well, some of the constituencies you just named, like the young and women, and to some extent people of color, those are certainly motivated voters. A lot of people might go and vote in an off-year election who have never done that before. Most people don't do that. Most people don't ever do it.
And there are turnout numbers now. Early voter turnout numbers are being gathered right now. And we know from past patterns that people who lean Democratic tend to be early voters much more so than Republicans. They tend to come on Election Day. And the statistics so far about early voting in Georgia in particular, that it's huge. The early voter numbers they've far exceeded 2018, which was the last midterms. And they're almost on a par with 2020, which was a presidential year, which always gets more people. And so, and Rosenberg is one of the people. Simon Rosenberg is not the only one who's been looking at those numbers. And I see the statistics are quite something. And so, that's another perhaps early indicator, that the polls may be missing, a big chunk of voters who could end up being determinative. But again, we don't know. One of the things that I have assiduously tried to avoid, and I teach this to Penn political writing students, is to try not to be predictive, and and try not to say that something will happen or is highly likely to happen. To stay away from that. And I've seen a lot of chatter on Twitter today about the Fetterman-Oz race, saying, "Oh, when Fetterman said this and the way he said it, that was the moment when he lost the race." Well, I think also that's social media. That's the impulse. You want to say something on social media that's going to stand out so that it could cut through the clutter of a million other voices. But, I don't think we can say that there's any one moment where either he or Oz has lost it. I just, so it's best not to say it.
One of our favorite newspapers, the Philadelphia Inquirer, had an article recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, where a couple of their reporters went out to try to figure out what undecided voters were feeling. And they came away, you think of undecided voters as people who are weighing the options, looking at both the Democrat and the Republican, seeing who's got the best. No, undecided voters, according to this article, are just people who don't give a damn. They haven't paid attention at this point. Oh, really? There's an election going on? Undecided voters are usually people who don't know what's happening and who don't necessarily have a stand. So why do we place so much importance on undecided voters when they're people that probably won't pay attention until Monday with Tuesday?
Because they haven't made a decision yet. Yeah. That's the name.
And they'll wake up on Monday and go, I got to vote tomorrow. Or,
I know.
That,
the tip off is when you hear or read an undecided voter saying, and I've seen this a few times, they say, I have to do some more. I really have to take a look at the issues and do some more research on that. That's the tip off. They're not going to do the research. They're just going to, they'll just complain after the election that, how it turned out. I think probably one of the reasons that, the Inquirer did that and it's a common practice is when a race is really close and it just drives everybody nuts that they don't have a way to, everybody wants to know the average, I gave a speech talk last week, and people came up to me afterwards, and they always say, so what do you think's going to happen? Everybody wants to know, what do you think's going to happen? I have no idea, but what I think the reason people want to talk to undecided voters is they think it's going to give them some idea in a close race of how things might tip. So they're either not going to vote, or even more scarily, perhaps, they're going to vote on the basis of I don't know, who knows what, maybe the fact that John Fetterman didn't completely tie his tie last night, and he looked so ill-fitting in that suit, and they may go, oh God, I don't want to look at that for the next 6 years. I mean, that's often the way people vote. This is a terrible thing to say about my own family, but the very first piece of political analysis I ever heard in my entire life was when I was 8 years old, and I asked my mother. This was the JFK-Nixon debate, the Nixon year, 1960, and I asked my mother. I said, "Ma, who are you going to vote for?" And she said, "Kennedy." And I said, "Oh, why are you going to vote for Kennedy?" And she said, "Because I just can't stand that Pat Nixon." And and that was it. It was some visceral thing,
right?
And I heard it in 2016 too. People would say, "Well, I'm not going to vote for Hillary." Well, why not? I just don't like her. Well, what don't you like about her? I don't know. There's just something I don't like about her. And that was the end of it. That was their decision-making process. So I think that 99% of voters have already made up their minds because, they're in one of these partisan camps.
And again, you're right. There is a visceral thing. I'm sure there's a lot of people who look at Fetterman, who is a very imposing guy, very tall, very beefy. He has one of those Amish beards where there's no mustache to it. And he looks kind of threatening and kind of scary. The same way that people didn't vote for Nixon in 60 because when he was in those televised debates with Kennedy, he looked all swarthy and he looked like he had a 5 o'clock shadow and he was sweating too much.
Right.
So I'm sure that plays a role in it too.
Right. Oh, in fact, this funny. This just came up today in the class I was teaching about those debates, and there was right after it was Nixon had a slight edge before the first debate in particular, and then after it, Kennedy had a slight edge, and it was partly because Nixon had terrible makeup. He went out. Somebody from his staff went out and got him the worst makeup, and his sweat came through the makeup. And Kennedy looked crisp, and then there was a separate poll of people who had listened on the radio to the first debate. And the people who listened to the radio said Nixon won the debate.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. What is this? The fate of the free world turned on makeup?
Yes, apparently.
It was a new era. Television era had just begun. So
we'll be right back to our podcast in just a moment. But first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Dick Polman is Maury Povich Writer-in-Residence and Professor of Journalism at the University of Pennsylvania, where he's been since 2006.
From 1992 to 2006, he was national political writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, covering presidential elections from 1992 to 2008.
He was also political columnist at the Inquirer, and from 2012 to 2019, he was a columnist on WHYY-FM.
Follow his work at dickpolman.net and check out his University of Pennsylvania website at www.english.upenn.edu/people/Dick-Polman.
And now we return you to the musical Innertube.
Is there going to be a gubernatorial debate? Has there been one already?
There has not been, and
In
I don't
Pennsylvania?
believe there will be.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe you guys know better than me whether there have been any statements about that from either camp.
I saw one statement where the two camps, Josh Shapiro, Democrat, and Doug Mastriano, the Republican, they hadn't worked out a time because Mastriano's camp couldn't figure out a time to do it. But Mastriano has made himself totally unavailable to any of the local, the usual press. He will talk to the right-wing pundits on the radio, but he won't talk to any reporters, or he won't sit himself down for a newspaper interview, or television interview at all.
No mainstream stuff, almost at all. Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't. If he decided not to debate,
he would have to take questions from so-called mainstream reporters of one kind or another, and no softballs. They'd have to ask him questions about his favoring a total abortion ban and about his past affiliation with some right-wing activists who had made a lot of anti-Semitic remarks, and there's just a lot of stuff that he doesn't want to be exposed to. And that's what's one of the interesting things about that race is, can you win a statewide race in a swing state like Pennsylvania by, basically isolating yourself, within, the niche, one niche of the media, friendly media, and you're just talk about just mobilizing your base. If there's anybody in the so-called middle to reach out to, well, that's not part of their strategy at all. He just wants to talk to people who already agree with him. And are there enough such people in Pennsylvania? My guess is going to be, and I am just guessing, but maybe I can call this a semi-educated guess, is that there are going to be people who ticket splitters in Pennsylvania who are going to vote for Shapiro and for Josh Shapiro for governor, Democrat, and for Dr. Oz for the Senate. That would not surprise me, and I assume there'll be some stats on that afterward.
I mean, I think that that is sort of the Democratic nightmare. I mean, they really want to get both. I know the Democrats want to get both the governorship and the Senate seat. But it seems funny the governor's race has been very odd because not only is Mastriano not available, but really Josh Shapiro has not been much in evidence. You don't see his face much. He's been willing to let Mastriano sort of hang himself, which he's done in abundance. And it's odd that neither guy is really anywhere.
Yeah, the place I see Shapiro most often, I just see he's very active on social media, and a lot of it is, we can't let a dangerous person like Doug Mastriano become governor of Pennsylvania. I mean, that's the message I've seen, more than any other. He's playing it safe because he's 10 points ahead in the polls, right?
Right, and we should say that for our listeners that at the time of this recording, Josh Shapiro was 10 to 11 points ahead in the polls. That's far outside the margin of error, and that's indicative. That's one of the widest that's one of the widest leads we've seen in any race. It seems.
Yeah, it could go back. I mean, that's what's so fascinating, or frightening, depending on one's point of view, about these midterms is that, it could really determine the future course of democracy as we know it. If, for example, the New York Times did a piece recently that there's something like 350 to 370 election deniers, if we can use that term, who are running for various positions, not just Senate and governor, but, key things like Secretary of State positions, Secretary of State in the states, the people who oversee elections. And Mastriano himself has basically said, hey, he says he'd have the power to appoint a Secretary of State who could then refuse to certify the 2024 presidential results in this state. This is really serious stuff. And sometimes I just feel that we're just, not we here, but, voters in general, electors just kind of sleepwalking toward, some kind of train wreck. And I find that very disturbing. I mean, I know it's kind of common cliche to say, and I've heard it almost every election that I can remember, this election is, a pivotal election. The stakes could not be higher in this election. I mean, I remember hearing that clear back quarter century ago when I was doing politics, but this time it really does seem to be true. I don't know, when you look at the list of what people think are most important, well, all right, so inflation and the economy and yes, inflation's important. But are we going to trade our institutional values and our free elections for, 25 cents less per gallon of gas? Is that the most important thing we should be thinking of right now? I mean, clearly, if it is, then I will be happy to admit that I am out of step with what most people's concerns are.
There are 2 women running for the governor's spot in Michigan. There are 2 women running for the governor's spot in Arizona, as you mentioned earlier. What does that say about national politics, that there are more women involved, especially running for the highest office in a particular state?
Yeah, Don, I'll add another one. There are 3 women running in Oregon.
Oh, wow.
For governor. There's a Democrat, Republican, and an independent candidate who seems to be taking votes from the Democrat. But so there's 3. I mean, well, I think it's a great development in the sense that people seem now, or voters in general, seem to be more willing to almost as a given accept the notion of women in executive leadership roles, which is what a governor is. I mean, it's like, you go to the Senate and you're just one of 100 and you're casting a vote like 99 others. And in the House, there's 435 of them. But, to run a state, this is, we've seen, let's see, Arizona has had a Republican female governor. This was a couple cycles ago. And Oregon, the governor who's stepping down because she's term limited. That's another woman. And Alabama has had a female governor. And so I think that there's just more acceptance of women making decisions. Which is kind of it's kind of great. In fact. We were talking about this today also before I came on, but then some of the students I was with says yes, but the misconception a lot of times is that just because it's a woman in politics that she is a Democrat or that she's a blue trending liberal progressive pro-choice person, but Carrie Lake in Arizona, she's an election denier, she's anti-abortion. The Republican running in Oregon. Same thing. So it's we're getting them on both. There's a female governor in South Dakota, Republican, who's really, to me, just I think trying to position herself as a potential Trump running mate in 2024. All right. So, so it's both parties.
That's definitely true. As someone who's not running for office, but is one of her party's strongest figures is Nikki Haley. She's taking a breather. Right. But she is very strong as a candidate. I mean, she's smart. She's very vocal. And I think she's itching to get out of the penumbra of the Trump years before she makes a run, because I've noticed that she's just decided to, take some time off before she does the next step, which I'm very certain that she'll try to.
I wonder if she'll try to. And maybe 2024 might be 2 years, might be too soon to get out from underneath, particularly if DeSantis is running as well. I mean, he's kind of like MAGA 2.0 in my mind, but.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because in Florida, DeSantis is running against Crist. Crist used to be a Republican. Oh, and he's decided to become a Democrat just to beat DeSantis. I haven't really honestly seen many polls out there to show who's in the lead, but DeSantis is obviously in front of the public constantly with all of the junk that he's tied to. Do you hear anything about what's going on down there?
Just that DeSantis is not in danger of being defeated for re-election. I think it's. I mean, Chris has been around for a long time. And people know what they think of him, and he may just seem like I think to a lot of Floridians, he seems like yesterday's news. And for however controversial DeSantis is, he has a very fervent following. And I know this is unscientific, but I did a piece about him a couple of weeks ago, and my column gets picked up, it's syndicated. And so it gets picked up, and sometimes it runs in Florida, and my, oh my, such emails I received. And, he's got some very, very people who think he's just fabulous. They know exactly where he stands, and they love him for it.
Yeah, they were applauding the whole busing of or flying of immigrants to far
Yeah,
off.
I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of people down there look at that and they go, yeah, he's really sticking it to the liberals now.
Yeah, and I've seen reports just in the last week or so where in Florida they have voting police that are arresting former felons who were told it was okay to vote, and it turned out they still owed a fine. And so now they can't vote and they're being arrested. So, he has voting police out there arresting people for voter fraud, which I'm sure is he's playing up very big.
Some of those people who I read somewhere that some of those people who were arrested, they've been cleared already. There wasn't fraud. They can go vote. What DeSantis does with stunt, we'll call them stunts like that, and flying the migrants to Vineyard. He's very good, or he's very, he likes performance art. And those are that's performance art. It's like, don't just tell people what you believe in, find something, that can, some video, some visual that will demonstrate what he believes in. And so, there's voter fraud. So we're going to find these occasional people who supposedly, broke the law. But it's, I don't know whether these stunts have a long shelf life or not, but it could be the only thing that a lot of voters remember, particularly if they're not going to be the people who do a lot of research before they vote. Especially
since a lot of the people who were jetted off to the Northeast turned out to be perfectly legal. They all had appointments.
With the asylum. Seeking asylum, they had asylum hearings.
Yeah, they're all from Venezuela. They're all from Venezuela. They're not Mexican. They're not illegal. I think in some ways, if all of that has blown over slightly, it's partly because the more you look at it, the less smart of a thing it was to do, since it was, and there's the mysterious, what's her name? Perla.
Right. The one who recruited them in Texas. They went to Texas to find them.
Yes. It's I don't know what they're doing with her, if anything. I mean, she may be just cowering at home. That was,
I think the Department of Justice opened up some kind of potentially criminal investigation about, luring them on for false pretenses. There's some statutes that are supposed to, federal statutes that are supposed to say that's a no-no. So, of course, then I suppose DeSantis can play off of, the Biden Justice Department is after him, because it's all about,
play a victim.
Play the victim. Yeah. Victimization is part of the, it's part of the performance.
Part of what goes into that too is the 24-hour news cycle that we have decried for years and years and years. They're more than willing to have report after report after report of the initial impact. These people being arrested. I haven't seen one report that says, "Oh, they've been released. Everything was okay." These people flew out to or were transported to Martha's Vineyard. I didn't see reports that say, "Oh, well, they're all legal and it's all blown over." So the idea of getting that initial hit and not seeing any follow up, it just plays into performance.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, the thing is that, and it plays also to a weakness in the press, and I can say this as someone who I've been a lifelong journalist. One of the weaknesses in reporting is that the initial hit always gets the greatest attention, and we don't always follow up. We don't always revisit something a month later and say, "Hey, whatever happened with that?" A lot of things go by the boards, and you would think, in a way, you mentioned the 24/7 news cycle. Certainly with a 24/7 news cycle, at least theoretically, there should be enough room to follow up, because you got to fill 24/7 with stuff. But it tends to be that the hot story of the moment is going to get the disproportionate amount of attention, even in the 24/7 cycle, with, hashtag whatever on Twitter. Hey, it's trending. And so, even then, things that you should be following up on get left behind, even though you wouldn't think they would.
Yes, these are one of the many imponderables of being a journalist. The other one that I was always fascinated by is that the people who complain the loudest, get the most ink. And because you can make a lot of disturbance, a lot of trouble by complaining about something. And even if only 6 people out there agree with you, you're going to get in the paper because you're willing to go anywhere and scream at anybody. And it does, well, at least it has the potential for skewing what's really going on, right? And for skewing the picture of what's really happening. But often, as you've been saying all day, Dick, here, it's hard to say what's happening. A lot of the time, it's hard to really give a good chance. And I think this election year is a great example of that, of just how hard it is to say, well, here's what's going on.
We have to, sometimes I think it's important to admit that we don't know what we don't know. And it'll be clear sooner rather than later at this point. So, we're all hungering for some clarity. And I expect to spend, the week after the elections, just parsing the turnouts and the exit polls, the ones that are reliable, and trying to figure out exactly, what was the 2022 electorate trying to say. And, if anything, because you got to take into account all these people who just go, okay, I'll just vote this way. There may not be, a totally clear narrative. And, anyway, we have a humility. Humility is an important thing to remember when we do this work.
And I think the World Series will be over by then too.
Yeah, right. It'll be well into November. Hopefully there won't be, I'm glad 3 of the games are actually under a roof. I like that because it's going to get pretty cold at Citizens Bank Park in these evenings. But, that'll be fun. I just hope we don't have to any more of those crazy ads, telling us that we all live in a hellhole,
I think the last game, if we got to a 7th game in Houston, it would be on the 5th of November. So I think it would be worse rather than better.
That's right. That's right. Right on the eve.
So anyway, well, thank you, Dick Polman. As always, just food for thought for days, and we love having you on. I hope you'll be back with us again sometime. You always give us some really great ways of seeing what's going on. Even if we can't know it, we can get entertainment value out of it.
A few laughs always help. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Dick.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Check out our website at musicalinnertube.com, where you'll find all our episodes, profiles of our guests, and lots of extras. You'll even be able to leave us a voicemail.
Our email address is musicalinnertube@gmail.com. On Twitter, our handle is minnertube. Capitalize the M and I.
The Innertube is available on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.